Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is returning longtime guest, Sasha Ayad. In this conversation, we talk about her new project, The Metaphor of Gender, which is exploring from what she hopes to be a broader, more nuanced point of view, the way that adolescents and parents and families are being taken up by gender as a social phenomena and as a psychological phenomena. You can find Sasha's work down there in the description, as well as links to support this channel. Without further ado, here's Sasha Ayad.
There's something like very Wizard of Oz about your situation right now, but I don't know what it is.
We moved. My office studio is really big, so I don't know what to do with the background.
That's great.
So
That's cool. When did you guys move? It was a while ago now, right? I feel like I remember this.
2 weeks ago.
Oh, recently.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I hope it's
How are
going
you?
well.
Yeah, we're just getting it all up and running. You know how
Yeah,
it is.
yeah, totally. Yeah, good to see you, and I hope that Leslie's doing well and the kiddos are good. And yeah, I'm good too.
Yeah, are you?
I am good. There's a lot going on, but I'm good.
Really? Like what? Are you traveling?
Yeah, I'm traveling a bit. I had a lot of trips this year, but all
Yeah.
like social. Like I decided not to really take any trips except for our upcoming retreat in November. But doing some traveling. I had my first cortisone shot. I don't know if you can see. The Band-Aid is actually my flesh color. It's like they made
Oh.
it for Egyptians. Um, so just some like health, good physical stuff, health stuff, travel stuff. Of course, busy working on the new channel and work related stuff and writing and substacking and all that stuff. But it's all good.
Any professional troubles? Are your professional organizations bearing down on you anymore? Or are they kind of leaving you alone?
No, I mean, like my license has not had any challenges to it for many, many years now, thank
Yeah.
goodness. And I'm not really keeping up with the counseling association. Like I don't really participate in those professional organizations much. I'm just kind of head down focusing on what I'm doing. But no, I don't really feel any of that pressure. And
No.
it's interesting too, like I'm so grateful that in my real life I've not had any trouble. Whereas like I know you interview a lot of people who like their whole neighborhood or their, kids, parents and friends or, I don't have any of that. So I'm very lucky. Like my work has not had any bearing on my real life at all. Is that makes sense? It's kind of weird to say that real life versus work life, but
Yeah. But does your work make you a better person, you think?
it's interesting that you ask that. I mean, of course, we all have some sort of blind spots and biases, but what I'm doing now, I think, which is really what I've been doing in therapy with young people, is really trying to give the benefit of the doubt and like really take seriously all of the arguments that I disagree with, essentially. And
Yeah.
I think there's something about that that really it's challenging, it stretches me, really, you have to kind of humble yourself to some degree to take take seriously the arguments and positions of people that you ultimately don't really see eye to eye with. So I think that's been really good. Of course, I'm not going to be able to do that 100%,
Yeah.
but I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're still working primarily with what, teenagers?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't onboarded a new client in quite some time. So a lot of
Oh.
the young people that I work with are young adults now. And so I'm working with adolescents in their young adult years mostly now, and I do a lot of work with parents. So, I mean, I would say I'm doing parent consultations a large portion of my time, and then working with my small caseload, and then now doing a lot of writing and working on the new channel. And I do a lot of work in my parent membership group. So I'm, trying to do these monthly Q&As, and I share, my thoughts via videos every month about common things that parents are dealing with. So yeah, I do kind of a variety of things, which is really, I need to do a variety of things or I get kind of restless. So I
Oh, yeah.
really like having my mind kind of operating on different things for
Yeah.
work.
So what are you? Are you you're a mental health service provider writ large?
Oh God, that sounds so generic. It's
Well,
like
I
a
know.
bureaucratic
What
role.
category do you, does all this
I
stuff fit
mean,
into? So much
well,
stuff.
I know it's a lot of stuff. I mean, I would say primarily I'm a therapist, and I know I've heard recently, you know, Jonathan Shedler points out that that word doesn't really have any meaning in and of itself, the
Yeah.
word therapist. But I'm
Yeah.
a licensed counselor, and so, primarily I think of myself as a person who's engaged in the work of therapy with young people, and then I try to take what I learn in that process and help parents to help their kids. So you
Mm.
were looking for like a short one-liner, but I would say an adolescent therapist and parent coach is
Yeah.
probably the
Yeah.
shortest way to describe what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did you start a new channel?
Well, Stella and I did the podcast Gender Wider Lens for 4 years, and it was a really valuable experience. We learned a lot, and I feel like I learned a ton. But in the back of my mind, I just kept thinking about the kids that I work with in my practice and the many, many kids from, parents that I talk to, and thinking there's really not a lot out there for them that is balanced or nuanced. So like there's kind of two camps. If you look at how young people are getting their information about gender and gender identity and transition and all of that, it's either from kind of the most ardent trans activists, people like, and especially YouTubers like the Jamie Dodgers, who are just pure trans activist ideology. Or sometimes they find themselves down the Blair White, Buck Angel rabbit hole where they are sometimes, and I'm not trying to call out anyone specific, but there's a whole genre of kind of critical YouTubers who really end up making fun of blue-haired, non-binary young people or kind of poking fun at some of the belief systems or some of the mental health issues that are on display online. And so, and I think there's a place for everybody. Like, I think we should let everybody have their say and give their opinions. But I do think young people that I've met are very intelligent and they're really trying to make sense of who they are in the best way they can with the tools at their disposal. And so if you are kind of a young person and you're 16 or 17 and you're out there on the internet trying to figure things out, you either have like this perspective or this perspective, but what if there was a place kind of in the middle that said, hey, I'm going to take both of these perspectives really seriously and we'll kind of flush it out together as best as we can. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really trying to do that on my channel, The Metaphor of Gender. And it's been really interesting to see people's reactions and responses. And I don't know if you've had a chance to watch any of them yet, but like the production, I'm very excited about and proud of. It's not like anything that we did on Gender a Wider Lens, but it's like really cool with like awesome graphics and like music and
Mm.
sound effects. Like it's quite a lot of work, and I'm not the one doing it. I have a producer, but I mean I am funding it fully myself, which is a
Yeah.
lot. But I just
Yeah.
really believe in it, and I'm really excited to create something that hopefully feels different to people. And based on some of the reactions I'm seeing, I think it does feel different to the audience.
Mm-hmm. So, in the gender critical point of view, there's the feminist or, kind of the pre-progressive, pre-third wave feminist critique about gender being purely a social construct or some sort of vestige of sexism. analyzes things from a cultural standpoint that's really rooted in a particular time and place, a particular culture at a particular moment, that preceded the era of, like massive transition, as a trend, the trans trend. And by that, I mean, not necessarily the phase in a, pejorative sense that people go through a phase or anything like that, or that they're trendy.
But like a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah,
kind of.
huge cultural phenomena. And then there is the harder line, Helen Joyce, Colin Wright, biological stance that reduces this thing called gender into just a synonym for sex. And then you go and you prove what sex is indisputably. You say there's two sexes, just because some people are born with half a leg doesn't mean that we're bipedals on a spectrum or anything like that. And it distills the woman down to the large gamete and the male down to the small gamete, and then rebuilds everything up from that and all the hormones and stuff like that. But sounds like you're taking a different tact by front and centering, you're not somewhere between the biological, materialistic, breakdown of gender into sex, and then the cultural phenomena, gender as a cultural construct and a vestige of sexism. But gender is a metaphor. It sounds more playful, like you're opening up this room.
I hope so. I mean, I don't see myself at all as a gender critical person anymore. I mean, I think that term emerged as a counterpoint to what it seemed like was a sweeping takeover of a certain type of dogmatic transactivism across institutions. And so people saying that they were gender critical was just a way to say, hey, I'm a counterpoint to that. But I think now in 2025, I don't think that word means anything particularly attractive to me anymore. And I've seen it, I don't even know what the word is, like turn into something very, very unusual, especially in the online space, that I don't even want to get into because I'd rather talk about the kind of vision that I have. But I don't see the metaphor of gender as a gender critical channel at all. What I'm doing here is I'm saying, first of all, I don't want to reduce, and I deliberately use the word gender because it has different meanings to different people. I know a lot of people say like, well, gender is a meaningless word, you shouldn't use it. Well, no, it doesn't matter, because when we're talking to young people for whom this cultural thing is really, really important, we have to use the language that resonates with them. And what I'm trying to do on the channel is say, hey, we can look at this gender idea as a metaphor for something else. And if you want to take that metaphor and turn it concrete by going down the medical pathway, for example, that's an option you have. But let's slow down first and say, okay, is gender perhaps not about, brain scans or labels or gametes per se? What if it's a metaphor for something? And so in the first episode, I kind of explain that metaphors are a natural way that our minds use poetic and figurative language to express something that's really hard to communicate. So if you say, oh, God, I just was so uncomfortable in that meeting, I felt like crawling out of my skin. You don't literally mean you want to peel yourself off of, your flesh. You mean like, I just was so viscerally uncomfortable, I wanted to get out of there. So metaphors are really powerful ways that we can express to others something that doesn't maybe have other ways of being described with that kind of resonance, right? Or that kind of like visceral connectivity. Like you can get that moment even if you weren't in the meeting and you don't know what that feels like. So I say, hey, the metaphor of being born in the wrong body is a really powerful way and to try and describe a lot of different feelings. And in the series that I have coming up next, I'm going to be talking about all of the different ways that people describe their own experience as gender dysphoria, even though it's not just one thing. it can mean very different things for different people. Taking on a trans identity can have very different outcomes in different contexts. Some people's trans identity makes them feel more visible, more seen, more in the spotlight, whereas others use their trans identity to kind of blend in and disappear. So what does this mean? And so I'm really grappling with, what are these words that we're using? What meaning could they have behind them? And rather than saying, either we have to take this 100% literally and just kind of regurgitate what the activists tell us, or say this whole thing is absolute BS, we're going to reject it all. I'm like, no, there's really valuable stuff here.
Yes.
People are saying something with this.
Yeah.
And, I also, as much as I have obviously big issues with gender medicine and the way it has been used on children, I think as a therapist, well, let me back up. Just as a person living on planet Earth with the literally millions and millions and millions of human beings on the surface of this planet, like, of course, some people are going to transition and find a lot of value in that. It would be very strange to, I think, to say that, these kids who are questioning their gender, they have all of this stuff going on. They have, people are quick to point out all of the mental health complications and all of this stuff and that stuff, which of course it's true. But at the same time, I think inevitably there are going to be some people who go through these procedures, and for whatever mysterious reason, we may not understand the mechanics of it, for some reason, some people will find like, hey, this was helpful for me. Now, that doesn't mean that the way gender medicine is being practiced isn't horribly unethical, because it is. And I'm like, will continue to say that. But when you look at the experiences of adults, I just think we don't want to go down the road of this is always going to destroy everyone's life in every single case, because human beings are unusual and have lots of ways to live, and who knows why or how or when some people might find this helps them for some reason. Does it help in the long run or the short run? I don't know. But I'm really trying to approach this entire project from the perspective of intellectual humility. Like, that's one of our principles on the channel. And so that means I can't possibly know, like, in 10 years, like, will this person who goes down this or that path be happy? I don't know that. And so I'm trying to approach each video just with having those kind of flavors in the air as we talk. Well, as I talk through things, as I share my thoughts, as I bounce ideas around. And I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff to cover. I mean, there's a reason why for a certain period of my channel's existence, or my online work's existence, I was able to investigate gender for hours upon hours upon hours. Met a lot of people that way, a lot of amazing opportunities and, connections that way. And so there's just a lot there. And there's a lot going on there. And then I was a part of a particular period in history, the rise of, I guess, the J.K. Rowling rise of like the gender critical movement and that stuff. And then watching the political climate in the United States go through a very hardline pro-trans thing, and now kind of being scaled back in the popular culture and then in political culture too. So there's a lot of different levels to it. But when we speak about metaphor, we're talking about a way of relating to this thing. And everybody has a different way of relating to it. And there's a bunch of different ways to analyze it. And you and I together have covered a lot of these. Like, there's a coming of age ritual aspect to it. There's some similarity to anorexia. There's some similarity to the goth movement. There's a lot of these different ways of understanding it as something that happens again and again and again. These social contagions, and then the cultural lens. So what are some things that you're kind of broaching, some newer ways of looking at this that are not as common have not
Yeah.
been as well tread as the other ones that we've
Well,
kind of know.
I think I'm probably visiting a lot of topics that are, you know, the idea is like I want to visit these questions, just like you mentioned, for example, the anorexia question or the social contagion question. But I want to visit them in a way that is perhaps from a slightly different angle or lens. So, I'm
A
putting out
wider lens, perhaps.
a wider lens. Yeah, a different lens this time. I'm putting out, well, I mean, I have tons and tons of ideas for videos, but what I wanted to do at the kind of early stages of the channel is, first of all, lay out kind of what are the founding principles here? Who is this channel for? Why
Your
am I doing
methodology,
this?
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then next up is going to be a series called Hidden Roots of Gender Dysphoria. And I think it touches on a lot of the things you just said. So, rather than saying, for example, none of these young people have real gender dysphoria. It is just a, blank. It is just a social contagion. It is just a mental
Or
illness.
post
It
hoc
is just a,
rationalization
yeah,
for, ambiguous distress or something like that.
right. Or it's just, queer theory enacted. Like, and those things have nuggets of truth. I mean, I always think like there's always a nugget of truth whenever you hear something being repeated a bunch of times. Like there's got to be a nugget of truth to it, or else it wouldn't resonate with people. But instead, I'm saying, hey, look, gender dysphoria is a really complicated condition. And it is just a bucket of experiences and symptoms that happen together. No judgment. Let's talk about what are some of the common contributors that I've seen in my work with young people who have
Okay.
gender dysphoria. And the way I frame these questions is like, well, it is a very natural and healthy thing for human beings, especially when we're young, to relate to one another and start building, common identifications. So if you are 16 and you move to a new school and you meet some cool people and they happen to have a lot of the same, interests as you guys like the same bands, you listen to the same, I don't know what's podcast, probably not for kids, but you like the same video games, whatever, and you realize, hey, this friend of mine just told me she identifies as non-binary. I should say they identify as non-binary. Well, what's going to happen next? There's nothing pathological about being like, oh, that's really interesting. Tell me, like, what does that mean? Like, it's normal and healthy for people to want to connect with each other, to find, common pieces of experience that they identify with. Like, oh, you know what? I've had a similar experience with feeling weird about being a girl too. And like this pattern of reciprocal communication and identification and questioning that is normal and healthy. So I'm trying to talk about these things in a way that's non-pathologizing. Or, for example, there's going to be a video about desires for erotic embodiment. Like for some people, they feel really exhilarated or maybe even soothed putting on opposite sex clothing. And there might be a lot of kind of complicated feelings around that, but let's take away the stigma, let's take away the judgment, let's take away the shame, let's take away that's not a real idea. Let's just be curious about these things. And so there are, these kind of 7 common roots of gender dysphoria that I'll be describing. And of course, they can overlap and interact, and there can be many of them, and they can shift over time. But all of this is legitimate and real. And I think the point that I'm going to make towards the end of this series is, we need to have a broader behavioral repertoire for managing these feelings. So for example, if the current thinking is, if you have any of this discomfort, then the first thing you do is figure out if you're trans. If you are trans, quickly, like, start experimenting with hair, clothes, pronouns, make other people use your pronouns, and then start binding or doing this or getting, breast forms. Like, if we have a formulaic pathway for these things, it's going to lead to problems because we actually are talking about such a broad range of experiences that we need a broad range of strategies that people can use
Yeah.
to honor their experience, to manage it, and to make conscious choices about how they want to move forward, rather than this kind of like conveyor belt of like,
Yeah.
all of you come here, you have these totally unrelated experiences, everyone gets new pronouns, everyone gets medical intervention. Like that doesn't make actually any sense.
Yeah.
So rather than trying to kind of like either debunk activists or gender criticals, I'm just saying, hey, there's a lot of really interesting things here. All of this is legitimate to have these feelings and thoughts. It doesn't mean you are, broken or mentally ill or brainwashed. Like there are valuable things that these young people are grappling with, but we have to stay grounded in reality. So like that's another one of my values, that like in reality, we deal with trade-offs. And
Okay.
that's a right that people have as
That's a good
adults
one.
to make
Yeah.
choices and deal with the trade-offs involved. But like in order to do that, we have to stay grounded in like really truthful, thoughtful, let's grapple with all the intricacies here, rather than going into something kind of with a fantasy in mind or something along those lines.
I do think you just made me think that if there's a more or less a conveyor belt on going trans, like you have these questions and then you do this thing and you do this thing and you do this other thing, similarly to not contend, I'm trying to come up with a word that's less contentious, but to wrestle or to engage, I guess, to engage with transness, I think it's just as wise to avoid kind of a conveyor belt like thing. You like listen to this argument and then you listen to this argument. And pronouns are rohypnol and then the gametes and then da-da-da and then social, sex stereotypes and da-da-da and then AGP and then da-da-da-da. Because they're all there, but I've never met a single trans person or detrans person for that matter who's had the same path. There's a lot of similar beats.
Yeah.
The stories themselves, when I look at my detransition body of work in toto, it's very much a hero story, or a heroine story, a harrowing heroine story. The older myths, and they're not really popularized. The older myths for female becoming or feminine becoming is usually like a going down into the underworld and then a coming back up. And you see a lot of that. There's that kind of similar pathway. And metaphor opens up the mythological. It opens up a narrative point of view. I like trade-offs is a good way to deal with reality. Narrative's a really good way to deal with internal reality.
Yeah. And that's also kind of in my fantasy. Like I want to talk a lot about storytelling and the power of the narratives we have about ourselves, and how having, a hopeful and flexible narrative is so important. And I think this could, be seen on multiple fronts. Like you can take, for example, the experience of a person who chooses to transition under the pretense of like a doom and fear narrative. Like if I don't do this, I might kill myself, or it becomes,
or if you do that, you'll be broken forever,
Right.
There's always an opposite to it.
Exactly. And so these are kind of really important kind of tools and snippets from different fields, different areas of the field of psychology and, different wisdom traditions. And like, I'm certainly not the most qualified person to put this all together, but I am curious about these things. And I do think it's really interesting to approach these questions of identity from that lens. And so, I say all thoughts are allowed here, all feelings are allowed here. And from that same perspective, I haven't said it explicitly on the channel, but all words are also allowed. So if somebody says, hey, I, think that my identity is really important to me, whereas I've seen some people online being like, what does identity even mean? That doesn't mean anything. Or, I'm transmasculine, for example, that term. What does that even mean? Like, okay, well, let's find out. Let's find out. And so I just don't want to shut down any paths for inquiry or curiosity. And I'm really just trying to stay open. But ultimately, I'm trying to introduce ideas to young people that have historically been framed in this little activism world as like untouchable ideas. I really want to be able to say, hey, like let's really ask questions about these things without judgment, without any kind of accusation, but from a curious place.
I I opened up my YouTube app. Do you have it on your phone, to check your subs and like do your comments and see how videos doing, if you're demonetized or something like that, And I saw my sub count was 96969.
I saw that. I saw you posted that.
I've been at 96 or 95, 94,000 subs forever. I just want to get to 100,000 just so I can let it go.
That's so cool.
It keeps on growing, but slowly. But some commenter or somebody on Twitter commented, like, what is your show even about? It's not about one thing. You go from one thing to another to another to another. And I know that I know the people who get really successful really quickly, especially. They have a honed message and they have a honed identity. Like, I am this, I talk about these things, or I'm anti-woke, or I'm a democratic socialist. You find your little niche and you just go full bore into that. And for whatever reason, personality defects or whatever, I can't. I did gender a lot, and I'm like, I can't do this gender anymore. I'm tired of feminists like ganging up on me online. It's just too much trouble, And plus, I was bored of it or whatever. But when I look at my work in toto, my online work, my YouTube channel, my Twitter, more or less, it does all have to do with identity. And it started with questioning and examining the way that the so-called woke or late stage progressive liberalism had framed identity in these categories of oppressor and oppressed, and the way that they deal with that. And then gender was really about identity, and now the work I've been doing the last couple of years is like investigating, what is this right wing phenomena? Like, what is this thing that's not liberal, not progressive, and it's a lot of different things. But one thing that's very common among all these different political groups and all these different political phenomena, is like this grappling with identity. Who am I? Who are we? And even the liberal backlash, or even supposed backlash to the hard right, they see the hard right grappling with identities that the liberalist says, no, we no longer have a racial identity.
Yeah.
We no longer have, but that doesn't really work when your country's being flooded by people from another country. Like, you have to have some sort of collective identity. And we have such a hard time with identity. So I think that on a meta level, the work that you're doing and have done with gender does translate into this underlying identity crisis, if you want to go the Vervaeke route. But so I want to get your ideas on how have you refined your idea of what this identity thing is? What is identity? How are kids using identity right now? Like, what is this thing? And this is very similar to that ancient question I used to ask you. What is a human being?
What is a human being?
What is a human?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm hopefully I will continue to think about this and evolve my understanding of this, because I myself am a person with an identity, right? Whatever that means.
Well, more than one.
Many identities.
You're a weightlifter. Right. You're a woman with hair.
A woman with hair that changes all the time.
Every time.
Yeah, something I talk about just a little bit in the intro is that, our identities are always kind of being negotiated, because they're not only something that exists internally within us in this kind of silo, but our identities are being expressed and formed in interactions with others. And of course, how other people interact and see us has something to do with how we understand ourselves. And it's interesting because it's like the more porous, especially, something that I've noticed in myself and a lot of clients I have, like, if you have a very porous sense of identity, it means that the way others interact with you and perceive you is going to have a very strong impact on your kind of questions about yourself and how much do you let that impact you. Whereas Other people seem to be almost like barricaded behind what seems like an impenetrable sense of themselves that doesn't maybe shift a lot in different contexts. So I don't know, like there's something about that porous versus impenetrable question that I think is really interesting. And of course, it's so contextual. Like, you know, myself, like something that I'm doing right now is I'm studying Arabic. I've been studying Arabic actually for many years now, not with the kind of dedication that I think I wish I could have, but anyway, enough. And it's so interesting that like in certain contexts in my day-to-day life, just here in Phoenix, Arizona, I feel pretty Egyptian and kind of Arab. But then, of course, I talk with my Arabic teacher, who's a woman in Cairo, and I feel so American. And I mean, that's a very kind of simple example, but so what is my identity? You know, like on paper and according to like blood, like I am a certain thing, but that's very contextual and it totally depends on a million things. So I think it's very interesting. And I think at the end of the day, you know, part of the project of Adolescence is to sort this out. And so, you know, adolescents are also in a bit of a conundrum because on one hand, it's really valuable to try and understand these things, to ask yourself these questions. And I think the broader of a way you can do it, the better. So for example, you know, if you have a young person who part of their identity exploration is also like going through their parents' family trees and learning a lot about their past or, you know, exploring, you know, more things about their local community, for example, and like, you know, doing walking tours of their city. I don't know, like different things like that. That's really valuable. But, you know, adolescents are primed to be doing that sort of questioning. And so some of that is healthy, but then of course, some of that can become really self-absorbed and solipsistic and selfish. So it's a stage where during adolescence, people are really invested in figuring this out, but it's not always healthy to do it in a particular way. And especially not if you're getting your ideas about this just from reading stuff on the internet or watching TikToks.
Yeah.
So
one thing that, well, it's almost impossible as a adolescent to understand time, to have any notion of time.
I know.
You think you're immortal. You think that what's happening right now is like eternal. It took me a long time to, but I would become aware that whenever I was happy, I thought I was always happy. Whenever I was sad, I found that I've always thought myself as always sad.
Yes.
And there's a way of disparaging that and saying, oh, you're just in a phase. You're in a phase of development. That's something that probably was more bandied about when I was a kid. You know, my parents said, you're in a phase. I'm like, I'm not in a phase. I'm where I am. Like, if I am in a phase, I need to be alive right now, right here.
Totally.
But when you look at gender, gender, sex, I'm going to use those words interchangeably for this pivot point. Like a woman isn't just a woman. A woman is a little girl, and then she's a teen girl, and then she's a young woman, and then she's a woman, and then she's, you know, and in mythology, those were constellated. You know, you had Echo, and then you had Venus, and then you had Hera. You know, you can find these figures that kind of represent the strengths and the weaknesses of all these different points and plots along that particular arc. And when you distill woman into, I don't know, from a male point of view who wants to become a woman, you can see a lot of the men in those positions kind of grasping for woman in a particular point of time, like very fertile time, like a very sexual time, very like that particular time. There's more aberrational points of view that kind of focus on the little girl. You know, that there's a lot of crazy stuff over there, but nobody ever fantasizes about being an old woman. Like, I want to be an old wise woman. You know, a man doesn't have AGP to be a medicine witch. You know, and you know.
Totally. That's so interesting. Yeah, I hear that. I mean, and I just think it's so hard to contend with the current conceptions of what gender means according to this kind of like queer theory youth activism movement, because it is It's interesting. Like the other day I was watching, because, okay, so it was recommended to me by somebody who's really smart at online marketing that I should have a TikTok channel if I want to make my videos visible to young people. And I really was like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't even want to get on there. But anyway, so I did. And I saw this interesting video that is making me think of what you're saying here of like this MTF Native American trans person who was, I think, channeling this kind of like wise medicine woman vibe. It was
Mm-hmm.
not like a ultra sexy, but the voice was like this. And it was spiritual. Like there was something about that, and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." So I don't know. There might be people doing all kinds of interesting things with their version of gender when you kind of like
Yeah.
mix it in with indigenous cultures and this and that stuff. I don't know, but I definitely hear what you're saying. And I think there's a real, with that particular male fantasy of the woman, um, there's a kind of like this carefree girl who, I don't know, there's a certain image in my mind of just
Hmm.
who they want to become. And it
It is
is
a
not a
who.
highly serious person. I don't know how
Huh.
else to describe it.
Hmm.
It's a fun person.
Yeah, it's a fun person. It's the fun, cool girl.
Yeah.
And that could be, this is I don't want to go there, but pardon me for going there, but you can see that as an escape from deeper aspects of their own individuation
For
as
sure.
as a person and as a man. And that's something that in the demolition of sex stereotypes or sex expectations, rather, like a
Mm-hmm.
man was expected to be this way, a woman was expected to be that way. Those were kind of anchored in, the Chesterton fence kind of, they were disassembled
Mm-hmm.
without really people like
Mm-hmm.
re-erecting something that, a boy goes through a
Mm-hmm.
process of becoming, a woman
Mm-hmm.
goes through a process of
Mm-hmm.
becoming. And, I speak with my wife a lot about beauty and beauty standards as a woman, and her
And your
life as a
skin looks
woman.
amazing, by the way,
Oh, I
speaking
have
of
this
beauty
one little
standards.
pimp right here.
But
It's just
but it
poking out.
looks really good. I don't know if you have like a blurry filter, but I'm like, wow, what is
No, well,
Benjamin's
in post you'll
skincare?
see my actual 4K video. You're just seeing the stupid webcam version. So I
Okay,
like to
keep
preserve my
going.
frame rate.
So you talk about beauty standards a lot.
Well, we were talking last night. Me and Leslie were talking last night about a. I didn't watch the video, but Jordan Peterson put out a video or had a conversation and featured Snow White. And Snow White is this tale about a woman who was the most beautiful thing in the world. And then she gets upstaged by this upstart who's prettier, but not necessarily more beautiful. And it evokes the relationship that a woman has to her beauty as
Mm-hmm.
something that is at once like social cachet. If a woman is beautiful, she has a different life than a woman who doesn't have a lot of beauty. A
Mm-hmm.
woman who's a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
five, and I'm sorry, I don't really think in these terms, but just because it's how we think about these things in this very numerical metric culture. But a woman in the mid range or sub mid range, she usually has prettier friends, and she sees the world giving her opening the doors and like worshiping her. But the woman who ages out of that suddenly sees that, oh, I wasn't being served for me, I was being served for
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
characteristic.
Yep. 100%.
And there's so much development that a woman has to go through
I
to
know.
process that.
I know both women, even if we're taking this kind of archetype of like the very, very, very beautiful woman and the woman that maybe would go unnoticed,
Yeah,
amongst her
and
friends,
noticed, yeah. Yeah.
both of those women have a lot of processing to do to understand the dynamics all around them, to find compassion for themselves and to find compassion for the other woman that's on the other side of this spectrum. Like there's so
Hmm.
much there. I mean, the beautiful woman could easily become oblivious to the experiences of other women. And then the less beautiful woman in this scenario could falsely project that the beautiful woman has like this perfect life where she's
Yeah.
genuinely valued, but maybe she's not really being genuinely valued. And I mean, I think you hear sometimes from women who are a bit older, but like as their beauty fades, how they begin to have totally different experiences in the world. And I think depending on how you look at it and how you frame it, it could either be freeing or devastating. Like I can totally imagine that. And it's such an important thing to just realize that as we, grapple with these things or engage with these things, I think the flavor du jour is to critique all of that and say why it's wrong to do this or to do that, or why it's pretty privilege, or how it's, fat shaming or whatever, like these terms. And I think the much more interesting and important question is like, what do we do with the limits of reality? Like, what do we all do in a world where, whether it's right or wrong, I mean, if I am in a room and there's a remarkably beautiful woman, I'm going to notice her. Like, it's just, I don't know. I think it's just natural. And what we do with that feeling is like, do we go fucking bitch? Like, people do that. Or I mean, I'm more like, oh my God, you're so beautiful. Like, I'll just go up to them and be like, you're so beautiful. But that's probably, there's something wrong with that, I'm sure. Like, I'm sure there's something wrong with that. But like, what do we do in the limits of reality with these things that happen, these things that tend to happen? And rather than point out how terrible those things are, which there's a place for that too. There's always a place for every kind of analysis. But I think if young women especially, and men too, like if they don't have a kind of grounded, patient, self-compassionate way of engaging with these things that happen to us every day, all the time, it's really confusing. And especially like being a young woman can be so complicated in that realm. Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting question. It's a good point.
And gender, the topic of gender that you're covering and that a lot of people are into, that gives a little bit of texture. It gives a little bit of something to be able to deal with the amount of social pressure and self-questioning and weird developmental shifts, so it provides a language that otherwise doesn't really exist. I mean, I guess there are different languages. If you go the trad route, it's more formalized, like women go this track, men go that track. The kind of the liberal feminist route is do whatever you want to do and then kind of be politically active with what doesn't work for you, and try to make the world a better place. And then the progressive thing is even more like just do whatever you want and you are the most important thing in the universe. So you should really center whatever you want and then everybody else should kind of bend.
Well, no, not if you are kind of from one of the oppressor classes. I mean, what you want is not anything at all. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I
What
think,
do you mean?
well, like, for example, there was this is something I plan to touch on in my Hidden Roots series, but comment on my YouTube channel. I was talking about gender dysphoria and somebody was saying something like, it was a male person who was saying something like, I hate being associated with men and I would never want to, be somebody who was taking up space. And so I'm just trying to, identify with femininity so that I don't, essentially that was the gist of it. Right. And I think, of course, sometimes, right-leaning people are pointing that out. And of course, people on the left are like, no, there's, no such thing. I mean, I think there's some convergence now of being able to understand like that, when we put these ideas forward, men can also be vulnerable, males can be vulnerable to them. But in that sense, like that progressive impulse that you're the most important thing, not really, unless you're at the bottom of this victim totem pole, like you are actually not the most important thing and you need to be quiet and make room for people who have more, oppression points or something. That is just a mess. That is such a destructive way of thinking. I'm really hoping to try and open that space up a little bit on my channel, talk about that stuff.
I just had a question and it slipped my mind. So I'm going to go back to a previous question. You brought up self-compassion. What is that? What's the balance of that? Like what's the nuance there? How do you do that in the right way?
Well, the way I think about this is kind of very much inspired by Kristen Neff, who I think we've talked about her before, but she kind of wrote a book on self-compassion. She has a whole self-compassion thing. But she differentiates self-compassion from self-esteem because self-esteem is derived when you accomplish something concrete, whereas self-compassion is recognizing, number one, the universality of your suffering, that you're not alone, that everybody experiences that suffering, and accepting that you have flaws while still striving anyway. So self-compassion is not the same thing as, self-aggrandizement, where you just say, well, I'm perfect. I never need to do anything anyway because I'm great just the way I am. Self-compassion is like, this is really hard for me. It has always been really hard for me to do A, B, or C thing. But, this is my particular situation. I accept it fully, and I still want to work on this thing in myself, even if I fail, even if I can't be perfect at it. I'm going to keep working on improving this or that thing or whatever. That's the general idea. So self-compassion is just a way you orient towards yourself when you are suffering that, is kind and understanding, and also sometimes, you have to nudge a little fire under your ass sometimes. So that's how I
So it's
think
not just self-care and pampering.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. Is there, in your storied career as a gender influencer,
Oh, no.
are there values in the gender stuff? And by gender stuff, I mean the queer theory stuff, but it's not, I don't know too many kids that are walking around with Judith Butler under their arm. Let's be real. I mean, those ideas are banging around in there somewhere, but just kind of like in these forums and stuff, there's like this identity churn.
Yeah.
What are what's like the landscape of values there?
Are you asking me, like, according to people who buy into all this gender identity stuff, what are the values there? Or what are you asking?
Well, if it is a culture, it's kind of like it's a culture and it's a subculture. So there's got to be things that are important and unimportant, and it can't just be so. Just like who are you supposed to be beyond a man or a woman or somebody who's transing? Is there something more in there? Is there anything meatier in there that you think is a gravitational kind of vortex for people to use it to become better?
I think it totally depends on the kind of gender issues the person is having. And that's why I'm kind of going to be fleshing out these different routes, because you take somebody who is, let's say, a male to female person who transitions, but their goal is to seamlessly not only pass as a woman in society, but to be like the most beautiful, most sexy, most gorgeous woman, like very glamorous, right? There's models now who are, MTFs, and there's that kind of person. And I presume that the values driving that person's transition are totally different from the queer theory kids who are, I'm female, and yet I want to take testosterone and have a bit of a mustache, and I'm going to keep my breasts, and I'm going to wear eyeliner, and my whole point, my raison d'etre, is to break the gender binary and confuse people. And I love it when people look at me and go, what? I love that. So those are totally different people. Those are totally different values. Those are totally different approaches to gender. You ask each person what gender means, and you're going to get a very different answer.
Yeah.
So like the kind of Alok and like that weird, that guy's totally crazy, but like this whole queer theory type of person is not the same as a Blair White or a Buck Angel or any of these other like people who call themselves trans activists, but they're like, I don't want to smash the binary. I need the binary. Let's keep the binary. So, and there are people who again are trying to manage like extreme body discomfort, similar to maybe like an eating disorder or body image issue. So those people have a totally different value system. So I don't think that's why it's not one thing anymore. Like, it's kind of a weird phrase, but when I'm doing consultations with parents who are just baffled and they don't understand where this is coming from and how in the world could my child think that they're transgender. Like, I'm like, I always say, this is not your grandmother's transsexualism. Like, it's a weird phrase, but I'm like, this is not what you thought of as transsexuals back in, the 70s. This is a very different situation. Even back then, there were different types of gender distress.
Yeah.
But we're dealing with a totally different kind of hodgepodge of values, beliefs, ideas, and they don't always play nicely together, frankly. I mean, I think the Chase Strangio version of gender is totally different from Caitlyn Jenner's version of gender. They would not get along. They would not understand each other. They would have huge disagreements. So this is a different world now.
Wow.
But it's all lumped in the same category, which is what
Yeah.
I'm saying. It doesn't actually make sense for us to be saying there's no right or wrong way to be trans. Like, okay, well, then it doesn't mean anything anymore. So let's get a little more granular and try and understand these different experiences here.
Yeah. How did you end up moving in the direction of parent consultation? Was that just kind of a natural part of your practice because you were dealing with adolescents? So I assume that you probably deal with the parents at the same time.
Yeah. Like when I take on a new client who's a young person from the outset, we talk about it. And of course, I involve the young person in these conversations, but I have contact with the parents and the kid, knows about it. And I let them know about the conversations we have. But what I started to see early on is that, especially back in the day, I mean, I started my practice at the end of 2016. It's a different world now, almost 10 years ago. And you've seen how that has changed. But parents were just absolutely flailing because they felt like there's something really doesn't feel right. There's something that doesn't feel right about the recommendations I'm getting from these gender clinics or from these doctors. But I can't find any other framework for how to understand this. And so what I realized early on is like, if I can help the parents to get clear on what they believe, understand how important their relationship with their child actually is in this, I can really support parents to support their kids. Because it's like, first of all, I mean, there's only so much time in the day, right? So even if I worked with a kid once a week, that is 1 hour of their week. And the rest of their time, their parents are the ones who know them and love them best and have the most opportunity to help them, especially if they're young and they're still living in the home, et cetera, et cetera. So I just realized like this is really an important avenue, not only to help the kids inadvertently, but to help these families stick together. Because this movement, like the dogmatic trans activism, is like a family destroying movement in lots of iterations. And I have to say, it's not always just from the activism. Sometimes there are families that are self-sabotaging themselves as well. But I thought, if I can help parents stay connected and have, good connection with their children and have productive conversations with their kids and engage with this topic actively, it will be really helpful. And it is come to absolutely be the case. I've noticed that there's this, some young people return to their birth sex identity. Not all of them, but some do. And what I've seen is that there's kind of two pathways to get there. One is more passive and one is more active. And the way I describe the passive pathway is like, let's say you have a 14-year-old kid who kind of starts going down the gender rabbit hole through online or through school. And the family's like, okay, we're going to try to keep our connection strong. We're going to make sure that they have a variety of interesting friends. We're going to keep them engaged with good activities and spend time together and make sure their mental health is in a good spot. But we're really not going to address the gender much. We're just going to bolster their other important kind of areas of life. Sometimes, as a young person overall gets better, the grip of the gender thing can loosen and they can end up kind of veering back towards what is for them a more authentic identity, right? But the more active kind of pathway is when parents are like doing all the other things I just mentioned, but also, honey, I see how important this gender thing is to you because of the kind of relationship we want to have where we can talk about things and I can hear your perspective and you can hear my perspective. We're going to talk about this way more than we have been. And so maybe it's like every couple weeks you engage with the kid and ask them questions and maybe watch videos together and they can bring a video that they like and you bring a video you like and you critique together and you think things through and you share perspectives. That kind of active engagement, in my experience, if the kid is going to return to their birth sex identity, they're going to do so in a way that is based on like a more cohesive narrative of what happened. So kids like that may go, I spoke with a kid on my channel and her parents, and she said, what I realized is that, and this is after a long road, by the way, I don't want to make it sound like this is an overnight thing, like a really difficult, like months of like disagreement and fighting and all this stuff. And the school counselor acting behind the parents' back and giving the kid like the binder and all that. But ultimately she said, what I realized is that my parents do love me. And after kind of all of this stuff that we went through together, I realized that I was just really uncomfortable being kind of an unusual, quirky girl. Like she's, kind of different from the other girls at school. And she herself kind of went through various iterations of her own sense of identity. At first, she thought she was really like, non-binary. And then she thought she was true trans, kind of transsexual. And then she kind of realized, no, I think I was just caught up in some ideas. And so ultimately, what I've seen is that when parents are able to, and of course, not all parents can, sometimes this lands on a family when the kid is already 20 and at college. So I don't want to make it sound like this is always an option. But when parents are able to lean in with love and care, but also engagement, I think it can give kids more clarity about what happened to me? Why did that happen? What was valuable about it? What was I getting from my trans identity? What are the good and the bad aspects of it? And why do I no longer lean on gender when things get stressful? And so having this kind of cohesive narrative helps kids walk away from this, if it's an unhealthy coping mechanism, and not be vulnerable to it reemerging. Whereas like that more passive pathway might be fine until some new life stressor comes up. You have your first big breakup, or you fail your first class, and then all of a sudden you're in another identity crisis. Then it might be tempting to kind of lean back on the gender piece if that's not, if it's just a coping mechanism. So I know that was a very long-winded way of saying, like, I just think helping parents has such an impact, and I've seen that be effective.
Yeah. I wonder, this is another variable in the conversation, but some people, their relationship to gender is rooted in their body, and other people, it's not, or it's more of a nebulous thing, right? I guess that's one way to kind of understand, like, what is this bucket of gender dysphoria stuff?
Yeah.
Right.
I want to answer that, but there's a niggling thought in the back of my mind that I just want to make sure that I say, just about parents, because I think what's really hard, if you are a mom or dad and you're going through this with your kid, for many parents, there's the goal in their mind of like, I would like for my kid to get out of this, right? I want my kid to be healthy and I don't want them to have to go down this pathway. And many of us therapists end up inadvertently talking about desistance just because I think it's a signal that for some of these kids, this gender thing is just so far from being authentic and helpful. Like the fact that kids desist tells us something is going on here, right? But I want to say that there are going to be, just as a pure function of stats and numbers, with so many young people questioning their gender and taking on a trans identity, there's going to be a huge number of them that land here, and this is where they land, and they're not desisting. And I just want to say, like, if you are a parent in that position, it's really important to remember that that doesn't mean you failed your child or failed to do something or did something wrong. I mean, the parental guilt around these questions is just unbelievable. Parents are always blaming themselves for why this has happened and what did I do to make this something salient to my child, etc. And I think there's also going to be kind of a lot of devastated families whereby, like, for whatever reason, this gender thing does resonate for their child. Their child is moving forward in this pathway, and the parents are unable to adapt to the situation. So I just want to point that out because I think that's
Could you
really
go a little,
hard.
like, what, in that instance, what are some of the ways you would help someone adapt to that? Like, what does that constitute?
Well, if I was working with a family that was in that place, I mean, something comes to mind that I heard on a consultation recently, which was really powerful and meaningful. One mother said something like, she had an adult child who was starting to medicalize. And she said, I've shared, and I think this is important. Like, I think it's important to share with your child your concerns, be honest, don't tiptoe around forever, and just cross your fingers and hope for the best. Like, have genuine conversations. But ultimately, this young woman was deciding to move forward with a medical pathway. And the mom said, I realized that I can come to see my daughter as a trans man, but I'm going to have my own definition of what that means. And I'm going to have my own understanding that might not be the same as my child's understanding of that. But in order to have this relationship with my child, who's like solidly in this place right now, I don't know if they will be in 5 years, I don't know. But it's like, if you have a young adult child who's kind of staking their claim on something, you have to be able to, again, be fully present in reality and make sense of it in a way that will work for your relationship, I guess. And I think sometimes there's enough in the gender world that is scandalous and that is enraging, and there's a lot of gaslighting. And so I think, very understandably, sometimes people who have been hurt by what this has done to their child can get really dug into certain positions. And you can see sometimes parents move into a lot of activism and advocacy. And I'm not here to say what is healing for each person, because definitely people have to figure that out for themselves. But I always wonder, when there's a young person who the ship has sailed, like they've been doing this for, 10 years, and the parents just don't know how to adjust at all to the situation. That's heartbreaking, because I know that parents in that position love their children and they want the best for their children. And they obviously have very different ideas about how that looks. But like, what do you do when your young adult child has absolutely just like gone down a certain pathway that you find very scary, very devastating? Maybe you find it repugnant. You find it morally just terrible. But what do you do? Like, what do you do in that situation?
Yeah. At some point, gender's not keeping you apart. You are. I like how you said that the parent framing that trans identity in a way that's distinct. That's a tall order. I mean, I guess when we're talking about the parent-child relationship, you can do that amount of kind of like holding these things, and doing all the translating and stuff. But like in a marriage, I don't know how that would work,
No,
because you
not
kind of
in
have
a
to
marriage.
be on the same. You can have to be on the same
marriage.
level, right?
Totally different thing. And I mean, again, I think human beings have lots of different ways to live. It's entirely possible, I guess. But I know I could not do that. I know I could not do that. But I mean, I think, and I have to say, as a like big fat disclaimer, and I think some parents out there in the world don't like things that I've said because I'm not a parent. And so I don't know what it's like to have this precious child that you love so much more than your own life itself. I don't know actually viscerally what that's like at all. So that's my big disclaimer. I don't know. But I do know that I work with lots and lots of families, and there are many ways that parents try to pick up the pieces, stay in relationship with their children, understand this experience, and move forward with their families as best as they can. Not everyone will have the same experience there, but I don't think it's absolutely impossible. It might be devastating in some ways, but I don't think it's impossible. I know this is heavy. It's not my experience. It's just, as an observer, I have this bird's eye view, and so I can share what I'm learning. And so, my disclaimer is like, I know that I don't have the individual personal experience of it, having this happen in my life.
Do you know why you ended up in this particular relationship, counseling adolescents, counseling parents? Like, how did you end up focusing on adolescence? Just kind of like, I like this and I'm good at it.
I mean, I think I always have loved kids. I really connect with kids. I love their playful, silly energy. And I like the drama of teenage years. I mean, I don't know. I think some of it a little bit is cultural because Egyptians are such expressive, emotive, loud, dramatic people. Like, I think that that's very comfortable for me to be in the like roller coaster of teenage emotions. I'm like, I'm very comfortable here. It does not freak me out. So I think I've just always throughout my career really gravitated towards children and teenagers. And this particular issue, I think it's just,
You've devoted so much of your life to it.
Yeah.
Like a good quarter.
For sure. Yeah. And it's interesting because I tend to have these cycles of getting interested in something and then getting bored with it. And that has not really happened because I think I'm shifting my focus a bit over the years. And I think focusing now on this channel for adolescents is engaging me in a very interesting way. Yeah.
Is there something that's like gender that could be just the gender thing? If gender hadn't become gender, like, would there have been another thing, you think? Like in this
it could have been, I always say it could have been it could have been anything and everything. Like, I think there are probably smarter people than me probably could tell you why exactly it was gender and why now and like the cultural context. Yeah. But I really think this could have been just about anything. If you build kind of an intellectual infrastructure for the wackiest of ideas, I think you can make them spread. So, yeah. And we all have a biological sex. Every single one of us can ponder our experience in our sexed bodies in relationship to the world. And of course, questions about equal rights and gender and sexism and LGBT, or I should say LGB rights, all of that was in the air. So I just feel like it's an issue that touches everybody. Even though some of us barely give it a thought and other people go completely down the rabbit hole of obsession.
Have you been abreast of the stats on, is it still upticking? Is it subsiding, you think? Or is it at a plateau?
That's a good question. I should probably know the answer to that, but
you should do some marketing research if you're going to make another channel of it.
I know, right?
I'm just wondering.
No, you're probably right. I didn't really think that.
Is that your feeling though, that it's still? I mean, it's never going to go away. That's what Leslie has said. My wife, she says this isn't going to go away. Even if it goes out of fashion, we're still going to be around trans people. Especially, I mean, freaking 100%. Washington is just. I don't know why Washington, but Washington's very transed out. All the volunteer positions and the every grocery store at least has one, but it's just odd.
Really?
But, yeah. Even out here in Spokane.
Okay.
Washington State.
Sorry. I was thinking about DC and I was like, really? Okay, yeah. No, Washington State, I mean, it's incredible how regional this
It
is. I mean,
is.
it's
Yeah.
genuinely incredible. That is something I find beyond remarkable. Anyway, what are you drinking, by the way?
Oh, cider.
Oh, okay, nice.
Oh, cider.
It's
Yeah.
a very cute little cup, a dainty
Yeah.
little cider cup. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's going away. I mean, I think because of I mean, this is such a huge topic and you can approach it from so many different angles, but I'm very narrowly focused on
Yeah.
13 to 22-year-olds getting wrapped up in this in a way that is impacting their mental health in a negative way. So that's actually, I mean, it is a large percentage of people showing up at gender clinics, but it's actually a very small sliver of this topic.
Yeah.
And so I think there will always be young people who are struggling to deal with adolescence and puberty and all of the digital temptations, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Social and
yeah,
sexual and all of the above.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I just like something I remember talking with Stella about, or somebody on the podcast, like whenever there's some big news in the gender world that is like, oh, the cast review or WPATH files or all these things, it does not trickle down to the young people most of the time. I mean, they have no idea. So for me, what I'm seeing is almost like this pretty insulated world of like teenagers struggling with stuff, trying to make sense of themselves, and they found a way to do that.
Yeah. So, where can people find this and what's going to be coming up?
Okay. Well, the Metaphor of Gender is the YouTube channel. And so you can just go to YouTube and look for the Metaphor of Gender. And what I would really love for people to do, first of all, I would encourage people to comment, because it's really interesting to see the engagement. I mean, it's fascinating, Benjamin. I have people in their comments saying things like, I'm non-binary and this video has been the best explanation of my experience. And then I have other people saying, I love that this channel is trying to debunk activist claims. And then other people are, it's very interesting the way people are able to project and read what they want in the channel. And to me, that is a good
Welcome
sign.
to gender.
Yeah. And I just love that people have these kind of, and of course there are some people that are like, what is this? You don't really, I made a hypothetical. Sorry, I got so far off topic. I'll tell you
That's
this.
fine. No. Go. Yeah.
In one video, I made a hypothetical story about a hypothetical cartoon girl, okay? And I'm saying she about the girl. And somebody in the comments was like, please stop misgendering him. And I was like, I knew that was going to happen. So anyway, the whole thing is very interesting. But the Metaphor of Gender on YouTube, they can go there, check it out. I've also been trying to post clips and stuff in my Substack and on X, things like that.
TikTok.
And TikTok. I always forget about it. It's like I said it and forget it. I don't engage with. I'm still in denial that I have a TikTok. And on TikTok, maybe you guys can help me out. Like if anyone out there has a TikTok and wants to boost me up, maybe just that will help me remember to go in there and look at it periodically. And then if parents are interested in, getting support, we are officially running our last ever parent retreat this year. I think we're going to
Gender the Wider Lens, or it's you?
Well, this is going to just be me and Lisa this time, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Stella's not joining us, but yes, it is a Wider Lens retreat. And so I just think the landscape has changed a lot. I mean, when we ran our first retreat, I think it was in 2022, it was totally unprecedented. Having a group of parents, not virtually, in the same room, sharing these experiences with therapists, it was really something special, and it is very special. But things have just changed a lot in the last several years, and so we're pretty sure this is going to be our last event in Austin, Texas in November. So if parents want to join us there, it's really special. It's really special to be in the same room talking about these things. So yeah.
I'll link to all your work in the description. Is there a fun, little-known Sasha Ayad fact that you're willing to divulge?
That I'm willing to divulge, I think, is the caveat there. I'm not private. My husband's always like, you're so annoying when you talk about weightlifting. I'm happily talking about weightlifting all day long.
You guys finally did it. Congrats. Tying the knot.
Thank you. Yeah, we had our 1 year anniversary in May.
Oh,
So yeah.
lovely. Good.
Yeah. What's a fun fact that I can divulge? Well, I did squat 250 the other day, so I'll
250.
brag about that. That's exciting. And I don't know. I don't really know.
Yeah.
You know, I will divulge this. I was listening to your conversation with it's a long divulgence. Can you tell? No, I'll make it fast. I was listening to your talk with Scott Barry Kaufman,
I
and
enjoyed that.
yeah, I really like him a lot. And he was talking about kind of like destiny and your soul's, desire. And honestly, I couldn't stop thinking about dance when I was listening to that. And that's something that I feel like a part of my soul has just been put on a shelf somewhere. So that's something. I don't know. It's a longing. It's kind of a very bittersweet, nostalgic thing. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to
Yeah, maybe it's going
make
to
that more a
return.
part of my life. We'll see.
Maybe it's a part of your worship. Maybe you're here to dance.
Maybe. I think I am in some ways, in lots of
Yeah,
ways. So we'll
you are.
see. Yeah.
Sasha, thank you. It's been way too long. I don't even know,
It
like a
has.
year or something or
It's
whatever.
amazing. And like
Yeah.
Benjamin, you are like full circle. Like you're the reason I even put my face on the internet in the first place because you
So
interviewed
long.
me and it was the first
So long
conversation
ago.
that I had publicly about this topic. Yeah, it was a long time ago.
2018, 2019, maybe even 2017. I don't
I
know.
think it was like 2017 or 18. But yeah.
Wow.
No,
Yeah.
thank you so much for always giving me like a space to think things through together. And
My
I hope
pleasure.
people will give me feedback on the channel. I'd really love to hear what people
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, I'll have everybody go over and comment to their heart's desire.
Yes.
Sasha can take it, so just let her rip.
Yeah. Let it
Yeah.
rip.
Yeah. Cool.
All
Well,
right.
thank you.
Thanks.
End the recording. Ching.